All right. Double hit. GM. Here we are for another episode, the last episode, episode 7 of our SEDA-led mini series. In episode 7, we are discussing chain abstraction, which I'm super excited to be discussing, especially on the back of discussing things around modularity and fragmentation. Chain abstraction looks to be the hero that might save the industry. So very excited. Today, we'll be discussing a little bit around what is chain abstraction, trying to understand it as a concept, looking at some of the risks and challenges around chain abstraction, diving into a little bit of the tech behind chain abstraction, and then looking at how NEAR is using chain abstraction and kind of where the project thinks that chain abstraction is going to take the industry. Joining us today is a co-founder from NEAR, Illia, the Black Dragon, who's very popular across social media at the moment. Illia, it's fantastic to have you here. We should start off by just getting a little introduction into yourself, not that you need one, and your thoughts on chain abstraction.
For sure. Hello, everyone. Great to be here. Thanks for the invite. So yeah, I'm Illia. I'm co-founder of NEAR. Previously was in machine learning and AI, co-author of Attention is All You Need paper that introduced transformers and kind of revolutionized a lot of modern AI. And now with NEAR, we're taking a lot of the kind of technological innovation to really bring the kind of final chapter of blockchain, the chain abstraction, to truly enable 1 billion users. So we can dive into that.
Yeah, that's very exciting. Is that a NEAR coin phrase, the final chapter of blockchain? Is that something you guys are trailblazing?
I'm testing it out right now. So
well, it landed good. I like it. Joining us on the panel as well here is one of the co-founders from SEDA, Jasper. Give us your thoughts on chain abstraction. Is it the final chapter? You're quite bullish on it yourself.
It's definitely the next chapter, and I think it's going to be a huge chapter for sort of like crypto and adoption. It's probably also going to be something that's not going to go away. But I mean, I'm a techno optimist. Like there's going to be next chapters after that. There's going to be like new innovations that are going to like do cool things on the back end. But yeah, the title of the next chapter is for sure chain abstraction.
That's amazing.
Well, I mean, just to mention, I think the way I'm thinking about it is this is going to be the final narrative that doesn't have like anything behind it, and it's actually from now on this is actually real use cases, real usage, and real kind of economy using blockchain. So that's kind of what I meant by last chapter of kind of narratives, and we start a new book of actually blockchain being used across the board.
Nice. Yeah, the chapter after that then will be like mass adoption, consumer apps. Usage. Nice.
It's super interesting that you bring that up too, because I mean, Jasper, we spoke with Flo earlier on in the series as well, and we spoke with Celestia around modularity. Chain abstraction is probably the one concept that's come up in multiple episodes as like everyone's sort of looking towards it, looking forward to it as well. And consumer dApps is kind of the thing that they connect to it, right? We are going to go in and explore all of that, but this being sort of a bit of an educational series, Illia, let's just start at the beginning before we go into what the future is going to look like with chain abstraction. NEAR is definitely a leader in the space. You're definitely trailblazing chain abstraction across Web3 at the moment. Can you just, for the people listening, give us a high level, what is chain abstraction and account abstraction?
Yeah, I mean, the core idea of chain abstraction is that as a user, you should not care about which chain the applications run on. You want to receive the security. You want to ensure that your assets are not gonna kind of run away from you, and there's no kind of additional counterparty risk. But you don't really want to know exact implementation details, exact which bridge to use to move between two chains, which gas token is used on the other side, that you need to install a different wallet provider because it doesn't work with this transaction message format. And things like that, like all the technical details of, the differences between chains and the difference between kind of applications. And so, and this is like generally in the natural extension that we've been kind of as a space working on like, how do we simplify user experience, right? having kind of, just one private key, a seed phrase that accesses your account is very insecure, has a lot of UX challenges, and there is a kind of in general been problem on onboarding people and kind of how to pay transaction fees when users start, right? This is where we actually started. We originally were trying to use blockchain for our own use case for data crowdsourcing in AI, and we had a ton of people who we wanted to pay money, microtransactions, 15 cents per task. But for them to actually start using it, they needed to buy crypto first, which was very counterintuitive, right? It's like, we're willing to pay people for work, but before you can be employed, you need to give us money or give somebody else money, right? So it's a very weird kind of model. And so account abstraction was kind of this original concept of kind of hiding a lot of that complexity, allowing user kind of to onboard easily, to use whatever convenient kind of login methods, not pay transaction fees, and then being able to potentially later switch to a more secure custody methods, etc. But it wasn't I would say hitting fully, although Near have account abstraction from the day one. We have over 10 million monthly active users because of this, because it's so easy to onboard new users. And the challenge was it was kind of localized. Each of the account abstraction ideas and methods have been localized to a specific chain. And so if there's a cool stuff going on whatever new layer 2 that just launched, Near users are not able to go there, right? And then as a developer, you now have a choice, right? You're launching not based on where the best tech is for your application, but actually based on where you perceive the users and money will be, right? And so kind of the choices were more about almost gambling on where the users and other people will go to, versus actually hey, I'm launching my app and I'm growing it, and it doesn't matter where users are coming from, which is how Web 2 works, right? So it was almost like if you imagine that people who choose Amazon Web Services, the users will not be able to use Google Cloud applications, right? And you kind of need to choose which cloud provider, not based on what best suits for your problem, but where the users are. So chain abstraction is solving that, bringing a whole set of tools to the market across, Near, Cosmos ecosystem, Ethereum folks, you guys, to really tie it all up together, abstract all this infrastructure, and give users really convenient experience to navigate the whole Web3.
This is an amazing summation. Jasper, I don't know if you want to add anything on the coattails of that you've got.
Yeah, no, I think it's super clear. One question I have for Illia, though, is we're seeing sort of different terms being thrown around that sort of say the same thing, but it's not always the exact same thing. We're hearing intent, which are kind of deeply intertwined with chain abstraction. And then you have Polygon coining the phrase sort of account aggregation, which I got into an argument with somebody with that I said it's the same thing. They said it wasn't. Can you sort of dive in sort of these three buzzwords that are being thrown around?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of buzzwords, right? So there is modularity, intents, orchestration, aggregation, and a bunch of other stuff. And the reality is all of those are technologies to achieve chain abstraction. So chain abstraction is what we're trying to achieve, and then how will include a lot of technologies, right? And so intents is really kind of flipping the book, right, on sending transactions. Instead, you telling kind of somebody else to figure out how to achieve the result you want, right? So you don't really prescribe it. You don't specify the steps. You say what the final result you want. And it works better for some use cases than others. And there's kind of, few projects that are building kind of more generic intent marketplaces. There's more specific things for swaps and other things. But it definitely is a good example of something that's abstracts the blockchain, because now you can say, well, I have some Bitcoin and I want some bonk, I don't want to know how exactly this transaction happened. Just give me the amount of bonk I want, right? And, somebody somewhere will figure out how to, swap Bitcoin for maybe USDC, move USDC to Solana, and buy, swap Solana to Sol and Sol to bonk, right? But as a user, you don't really care. Now, aggregation is, and kind of some of the modularity ideas are really coming from how do we ensure security of the whole system as you have more chains and kind of abstracting this from a user. And this is the idea that between combination of data availability, ZK proving, kind of other concepts like what eigenlayer is providing, you can actually tie together all of the different chains in kind of cross settlement way, in like security way, where security is aggregated across all chains. And so that's really just a kind of, for me, a low-level guarantee is that you want to have to ensure that chain abstraction is secure for users who don't really go under the hood and, look up exactly how many validators are running on different app chain, right? And if like the subsets of validators are too intersecting between, with another chain. And finally, I think there's a lot more kind of technologies like what we've been doing with chain signatures is really to provide that easy experience to navigate different chains, right, from one place, right? So again, that example of Bitcoin to Bonk, the reality is now you need to have address on Solana and on every other chain, on Near, on Ethereum, on EVMs, on Bitcoin. And so with chain signatures, what we do, we actually turn your Near account to have addresses everywhere and allow you to transact really easily without needing to like manually figure out how to pay transaction fees, how to bridge, how to create accounts, how to manage the account abstraction of every single individual chain. So all of these technologies, they're all coming together, powering this vision. It's really exciting to kind of see everyone coming together actually in this. I mean, obviously, we also need oracles that providing information back between chains to create smart contracts that can transact across multiple chains with ease. So all of these pieces really just part of the stack for chain abstraction.
Awesome. Would you say that for the Near's like cross-chain accounts, like sort of like cross-chain account abstraction product that you guys have built, isn't that almost intent-based? Where you say like, hey, I want to transact on like some different chain and I don't really care who does it or how it happens. I just want it to happen. And then there's like a solver in the middle that actually performs the action for you based on a signature that you provide on Near. Is that how I should picture it?
So it's part of it. The core technology is actually doesn't prescribe that, right? The core technology just say this Near account has a address on the other chain that now you can sign transaction for, right? And then on top, we have kind of intent-based relayer network, which when user says, hey, I want to transact there, but I don't really care like which transaction fees are paid there, etc. I just want to pay with Sweat, for example, on Near. There's a relayer network that picks it up, uses the signing mechanism and then sends a transaction and pays for it on the other side. So that's kind of the idea is like you can build now intent-based platforms on top. And you can imagine the swapping as well in a similar way, right? So you can say like, hey, I want this Bitcoin to Bonk. Here's my address on Solana, right? Which is controlled by this account. Somebody go figure out how to do it. So kind of we're opening up a opportunity for applications to build intent-based apps with ease.
Very cool.
Before we dive under the hood, because I know chain abstraction is all about like getting rid of the hood, we definitely want to go under there. I just wanted to understand, because Jasper brought up a few different people that are all building towards this. Are we at risk of further fragmentation? Are we at risk of having chain abstraction multi-standards that cannot communicate with each other?
I think as a space, we all trying to figure out how to solve this. So, and we've been doing this chain abstraction days, having kind of Cosmos and Ethereum and obviously Near, and we're inviting more folks to join. So I think that there is, and Frontier been leaning a lot on standardization as well. So I think like there is a kind of desire to like bring it all together now, and it'll probably take some time. Obviously, like there's nothing worse than the standard that's invented in the lab that nobody else uses because it doesn't actually work with the real use cases. So I think it will be iterative process as we see some more chain abstraction applications and wallets coming in. They actually showcasing the like what's possible, And then we'll kind of be standardizing around some of those, kind of massive applications that have huge user bases. But yeah, I think like everyone kind of realizes that this is the way to go. And so now it's, it's a details under the hood, but also few driving use cases with, this million user applications that will probably do a lot more kind of be the kind of voice in standardization by like virtue of, funneling millions of users and, millions of dollars in whatever standard they prefer.
Yeah, the question of who aggregates the aggregators is something that comes up all the time, for sure. It's an issue, but I think, yeah, you are seeing like a real intent, no pun intended, of all the teams working on this to create standards for chain abstraction, which is good to see. It reminds me of the old days of with like RPC standardization as well.
It feels like a really good moment too for Web3, no, right? Because this is like the ethos of Web3, like working together, building together for this kind of decentralization. But I am curious though, if we all work together for this standard of chain abstraction, and then we have all these single entry points to interact with all of Web3, if you like, what's it going to look like? Because right now we're kind of the competition. I'm in marketing myself, Illia, so the competition in marketing is like, getting your narrative or writing the right narrative and making enough noise to rise above all the noise of Web3. When everyone's using chain abstraction, what's sort of going to be the defining factor, do you see, that people will to select which point of entry into Web3 they'll use?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it will become just how good your applications are and how good your gross and gross marketing is, right? Which is somewhat similar to Web2, except here you as a user go around with your assets and with your data, right? There's no like kind of lock in. So yeah, it will get pushed up in a way to be a lot more application and kind of service competition in a way, but at the same time, like, users will flock to what is better product, which at the end, users will win. And I think, we have this application called DAppDapp, right? So it right now aggregates 14 different layer 2s. It has over 160 different smart contracts accessible, and all of it is from one UI, right? So you go to DAppDapp, you sign in, and you can transact across different layer 2s across lots of different smart contracts. You don't need to switch browsers, you don't need to switch tabs, etc. Now, this is pre-chain signatures. So with chain signatures, you'll be able then to not switch networks and not figure out transaction fees and bridges. But that's kind of the experience, right? We can imagine now. The cool thing is every single app there is on chain, meaning the front end of those apps is on chain. So you can run another application like this, right? For example, you can have a desktop app, or you can have, a different customized version that for a specific user journey, or for a specific language, or for a specific, audience that provides a different experience, right, for different audiences. So I would expect a lot more kind of experiences like this to appear and be the driver for, as the chains got abstracted, the applications are now in a way aggregated and into these platforms. You will be doing a lot more like what's an overall consumer product and experience for navigating it.
It's very exciting to hear too, because I think I'm massive on end user experiences driving kind of adoption. I think it just makes sense that the people we're appealing to, the people that we need to come in the droves. And I do want to hear more about some of those applications that we can expect on here. But before we move out of segment one, Jasper, could you speak to a little bit on the chain abstraction stack? Because I know that we've been talking a little bit about it at SEDA, and I think it's a good way for people to understand exactly what is going on under the hood. How do we make this a reality?
Yeah, I mean, there is so essentially what you have is the idea is that you have sort of like entry points into like all of Web3 or crypto, and that there's like a bunch of different layers like in the backend there on like what does what. I think that what we're focused on as SEDA within the chain abstraction stack is sort of like the settlement. So you have these multiple layers. That's why it's called the cake framework, where settlement essentially makes sure that the party that does the action that the user intends to do for the user is able to get their reward paid out. Yeah, I don't have like the the details of like what exactly the stack other than that lays out, and we're focused on what we're supplying to the cake.
No, it makes sense. I mean, if anyone's interested, I think on our timeline we did post about the frontier research that sort of dove right into the stack. It's a very interesting read, and I guess it's still very early days. Like a lot of people are joining and adding different layers to the stack where they seem necessary, being a new early tech. Illia, where does Nia sit in the stack there? I guess, is there a specific area of the stack that you're working on, or are you sort of covering all slices?
Yeah, I mean, kind of the core piece that we're working on is with chain signatures is this permission layer. And then we also have some other pieces around settlement layer and application layer and solver layer. So we have a little bit of in every piece, you know, you want a slice of the whole cake. But specific, like the main focus of kind of with the chain abstraction group is really to bring the kind of this permission layer, allow, you know, user accounts to really be kind of multi-chain natively and being able to transact across all of this, and then allow everybody else to build in, you know, relayers, solvers, kind of intent execution, and then settle on different layers as well. But we do have, you know, DA for rollups to help with security and settlement. We have obviously Neo layer 1, which is, you know, performant, scalable, fast finality to allow to settle kind of on as well. And then we have decentralized front ends for building these applications, gateways, entry points, kind of in a truly decentralized way as well. So kind of different pieces of technology available, and people can pick and choose kind of for their use case what's the best kind of you know, flavors of different layers they want for their slice of cake.
The urge to make cake puns here is very strong. I could feel it across the panel
Yeah.
today, which I love. I'm gonna, before we move on to speak a little bit around the fragmentation and sort of what's led into this chain abstraction, I'm going to take a stab at walking through the audience through like a very high level example from a user point of view. Let me know how we go. Is this kind of what chain abstraction looks like? Let's say Alice connects into a dApp on Nia, and she has 1 ETH that she wishes to stake. Alice doesn't need to know which chain the staking pool is on at all. She just simply needs to click stake and then enter in the value of 1 ETH. And at that point, that's the dApp layer. She's now interacted with the dApp. And then the second layer would be the permission layer, which you're speaking to, where you would check the wallet, you'll make the signatures. So we're talking about wallets and keys. They'll make sure that the ETH is in there. They'll make sure that she has an address on the right chain that can sign on that behalf. Very high level here. And then that will be broadcasted to solvers who are sitting in the solver layer, who basically then return a possible pathway, possible transaction fee, possible transaction speed, and likelihood of the transaction going through, to which Alice will then confirm, like we do with transactions at the moment. We'll choose she will choose the best solver transaction, or the best one will just come up based on predefined parameters. We don't know, but she selects that. Then the solver goes off and actually completes her action of staking that ETH by doing it with their own liquidity. So they go off to destination chain, they stake that ETH on there. And then in the settlement layer, we're looking at things like SEDA, which are then looking at destination chain saying, hey, this action has happened. We can send an execution proof across to the origin chain, and then the origin chain can have that settled, saying that the action has happened. The solver then collects their fee for doing that action. But as far as Alice is aware, she's only staked 1 ETH and she's only had to click a couple of buttons. Is that about the long and short of it?
Yeah, I think high level, this is a good description. I think to make it even more fun, you can imagine like Alice actually has, you know, a Bitcoin and she wants to stake ETH. And so she definitely doesn't want to figure out how to swap that Bitcoin for ETH, how to set up ETH wallet, and how to deal with all that. So like that kind of, identifying that intent, saying like, hey, I just want to stake 1 ETH, take out how much Bitcoin you need from Bitcoins to do that and execute this. And so, yeah, you'll have kind of solvers that are figuring out, like how much they would charge for that, and then execute that from an account that Alice controls, but is kind of in this Relayer smart contract, allowing pretty much Relayers to also top it up, put money into it, and execute actions on behalf of Alice. And that's kind of one of the innovations we're bringing, is this kind of indirection that solvers or gas relayers are able to do on behalf of the account on different chains, without like fully custodying somebody else's account. And then at the same time, something like SEDA can then bring information back saying like, yes, it went through, 1 ETH is staked, release the fee and kind of the Bitcoin to whoever executed this.
I'm glad you were willing to go a little bit deeper and have more fun with that, because I do not dare yet. It's still such a complex stack that they're working around. We've actually got a really cool thread coming out later today for anyone who is interested. And also jump over to Nia's documentation. You guys have a lot of really, really good blogs sort of explaining through chain abstraction and account abstraction. I want to sort of take a step back. We can understand what chain abstraction is doing at the moment, but I want to say, have you at Nia always been building towards chain abstraction or account abstraction, or is this something that's come out of fragmentation due to modularity?
No, we actually, from the start, we're building with chain abstraction in mind. It just was limited to Near. We wanted to abstract the Near blockchain so that users and even to some extent developers can deal minimally with the infrastructure kind of complexity, right? So the example being Near blockchain itself is actually a sharded blockchain. We have a lot of, imagine like rollups running under the hood, but like I don't want any developer or user knowing about this, right? And so if you go to our explorers and to our wallets, etc., you will never see anything about shards, anything about kind of that thing. Although in March, we actually added 2 more shards, expanding capacity of the network by 50%, right? And so like for users, it should be like, hey, like things are just more capacity, transactions going faster, you can process more transactions. And for developers, same, they shouldn't know about this. Similarly, on the account model, we have meta transactions, we have, very programmable account model that allows to have like different access keys, and so kind of the account abstraction at a very high level, as well as you can actually turn your account into an NFT, for example, and sell it and somebody else buy it and kind of claim and set up its own permissions for it. So there's a lot of flexibility built into this, again, all for how to enable developers when they build applications to hide the complexity of the blockchain, so that users ideally don't know when they start that they're using blockchain, and then over time just become kind of more progressively richer users of this ecosystem. Now, somewhere end of 22 is where we kind of went from, okay, we're going to only build for Near, and this is going to be all Near stack, to like, actually multi-chain is happening. And there is an opportunity to actually bring a lot of this philosophy and a lot of this kind of functionality that we have across the whole Web3. And so we started kind of chain signatures project as well as the decentralized front ends around that time to really kind of bring this idea of tying all of this together and like what became now chain abstraction, and pretty much offering this now not just for Near, but also like working with other chains, working across the whole Web3, connecting this, allowing tools to work in multi-chain fashion. So that's kind of the transition. So like always chain abstraction, but it was kind of one chain. Now we're let's abstract all the multi-chain Web3 world.
That's an amazing journey too, and it's glad to see that everyone else is getting on it as well. Because I, for one, adoption is always something that we're talking about in marketing, but it's just going to come. I mean, we've said it earlier in the space. It's just going to come through easy user experiences. Jasper and I were throwing around some analogies this morning, and one of the ones that we were talking about is this idea that you have your phone, which gives you all your end user experiences. You use your apps in there, your messaging, whatever it is that you want to do, entertainment or other. And it's like the telecom carrier in the background that's making all that happen is irrelevant to the majority of users. When we change countries, we don't really care who the carrier is. We just kind of want that experience. So I'm very excited to hear that you guys have made such leeway with it, and a lot of people are also joining into that conversation as well. But I do want to speak a little bit, and maybe Jasper, you can lean in, because we were talking about this the other day. Any new technology, any kind of new narrative always comes with risks and challenges. One of the things, Jasper, I'd love to hear more on with you is like this kind of concept of a solver monopoly. Can you speak a little bit more about some of those securities and risks?
Jasper, do you want to go first?
Yeah, you cannot hear me, right? Okay.
We can.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I think that the risk for sort of that I talked about with solvers is what you want to avoid is with the sort of like more intent-centric solutions where you rely on solvers, there is this sort of like increased threat of censorship, I'd say. Because essentially what happens is solvers or solving for intent networks will be hyper competitive, which means that the margins will be very, very thin. And what you see in sort of like these hyper competitive markets often is that people either specialize for a certain subset of intents that they will solve for, or they will do like acquisitions and partnerships with people that have large part of the sort of like intent solving stack in order to maybe be able to get like a little bit larger margins by being like a more efficient, like larger entity. And I think what has been sort of like the horror story that's been pitched from the beginning with networks like this or like systems like this is that the only people that will be able to compete on the solver stack will be the Citadels of the world, and they will essentially filter out certain transactions or censor transactions based on government regulations, etc. And I think one of the arguments against it is like it's fine as long as you still allow then third-party solvers to come in and still execute on those intents, for example, maybe for a little bit higher fee, right? So you have like specialized intent solvers that just do the things that, for example, a government would not like you to do. Or like a Citadel doesn't want to touch because, I don't know, religious reasons or whatever. Yeah, so I think that is both the sort of like straw man for sort of like these chain abstractions networks and the steel man of like why the system is still better than sort of like a TradFi system. What other sort of like risks do you see, Illia?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely second that. Kind of if it's purely kind of highest stake system for solvers, this has kind of tremendous issues. So you do want as permissionless as possible ability for anyone to come in. Anomaly is actually doing a lot of work on the peer-to-peer gossip network for intents to enable pretty much a way for kind of propagate intents across the network, even without like you don't know who will be able to satisfy it, right? So you can kind of flood the network with it and make sure that there is someone who can pick this up, right? So instead of a more stake-based systems like some other platforms. I think the other biggest question from my side has been privacy, right? I think we have a pretty much ridiculous state of privacy in blockchain where everything is public and kind of traceable. And I think with chain abstraction, because like on one side, we're trying to achieve extremely easy convenience of usage. Users may don't even understand that they're like revealing, when they're doing something, we're revealing their whole net worth when they're paying for coffee, right? Which is also happens right now, but kind of generally right now it's fixed by the worst terrible UX, which is, set up a new wallet, go through an exchange to fund it. But going forward, again, we're trying to fix that UX so that you can just pay for coffee with your wallet. But at the same time, this means like at the current level of privacy, we'll have a insane kind of leakage of information. And so one of the things that I proposed is creating kind of a privacy shield around for chain signatures between who submits a transaction, your kind of specific addresses on different chains. And you can think of this as almost like a UTX, like unspent outputs, but it's like one-time usage accounts that you can have that nobody can link back to you, that they're still transparent, and you can see that you paid for coffee, but nobody knows that this is you and this was used only for that one transaction. So you can have like ways to avoid this, but we really need to focus and actually invest in developing that, because otherwise, we'll kind of actually be in a worse state of privacy, and we're already in a pretty bad state.
I think another part of privacy concerns is actually MEV, because if you expose your intent, you expose what you want to do, you're essentially opening up the gates for like a bunch of bad actions. Like, what's the flat center quote? Your intents will be used against you, right? Like, people will know what the maximum is you're willing to pay for something, and they'll always take the maximum, or there is like, I don't know, you'll definitely get front run on whatever sort of like delta of MEV your intent exposes. So I think that's another interesting one. Yeah.
Can I ask you on that?
That.
Because there's some of these intents are going to be like cross-chain, potentially more than 2 blockchains, right? Like depending on how intricate people are getting. When the intent goes into like the mempool, I guess, this kind of idea that these intents are all sitting there, and the solvers are, the solvers are looking at how they're going to solve these intents. Is there an opportunity, instead of just having MEV attacks on one chain, you could set bots up that will then be able to take advantage of that whole flow?
Well, I think it's like a different, like I would say in general for intents, it's not MEV. It's just the solvers is capturing the whatever's on the table, right? And so I think the general idea here is you need to be able to specify a more kind of sophisticated intent versus you saying like, hey, I'm willing to, sell 1 Bitcoin for whatever ETH. Usually you would want to always have a limit order. Now, the problem is limit orders have their own limitations, right? Depending on what's going on in the market. And so, which like why, most limit orders don't get fulfilled. And so what you will need to do is specify some potentially a more sophisticated formula, which says like, based on like last X trade or whatever, like I will only accept price that's above like 0.5% of that, right? Like you'll need to actually have a lot more kind of detailed specification there. Now, this is not user specifying, right? This is the front end of the application that will actually like have that. Similarly, how right now there's like a 0.5% slippage, requirement that, you can kind of customize, but it's, there. Like, I think we'll need like a kind of a little bit more sophisticated approach there. But generally, I think we'll see also a little bit different exchanges that will be, so like for near, for example, with chain signatures, you can imagine an exchange where you deposit all assets into your kind of chain signature address, like kind of remote addresses. And now you can on near trade extremely fast with, 1 second blocks and, a fraction of a fee, all of these assets. And so like your intent are here, and then you can withdraw from there, right? So like you can have a little bit different structure, which allows to kind of solve intents more localized and prevent a lot of the front running. Near also has like, when you include transaction, it executes in the next block, and it's like a specific order, like ordering is defined in a little bit different way. So like there's a lot of mechanisms. There's also like shielded pools now, shielded mempools and other stuff that's available. But you need to design kind of with a specific use case in mind, because I think part of this is like generically MEV is not solvable. For a specific use case, you can find approaches to mitigate it to a big extent.
Yep. I think a lot of the responsibility of MEV mitigation will shift to applications with these. I think actually a lot of everything will shift to applications. A lot of value will shift to applications. I think as soon as chain abstraction becomes a thing, I think a lot of responsibilities and it's really up to the applications then to make sure that they're maximizing their sort of like use of chain abstraction. It's cool.
Yeah, and this is why like the differentiation will be in how this application is delivering experience, pretty much. Like, you know, if your application is not handling MEV well and there's like solvers capturing all that value, then well, users will switch to something that's like handling that way better.
With all the steps in chain abstraction and kind of thinking about like redesigning to capture things like, or to mitigate, as you put it, Illia, like MEV and these kind of ideas, how much are we damaging the transaction speed for the user? Are things slowing down drastically? Is that something that needs to be considered?
Yeah, I think it depends on the specific use case as well. Because if you imagine like swapping Bitcoin for Ethereum, like your current transaction time is pretty much, I don't know, 30 minutes easy, unless you're on centralized exchange. So, and this is actually like one point I like to point out is that the current state of multi-chain experience is a centralized exchange. Like it's not actually the bridges, it's centralized exchange. Centralized exchange has way more users than any like individual chain combined because it provides you a multi-chain experience. And so with chain abstraction, we're trying to bring that experience, but you know, in decentralized kind of self-custodial way. And so, so I think like for many use cases, you are actually getting like time cut down massively because you don't need to like figure out bridges, figure out gas tokens. Like, you know, how many times people have like sent USDC to another chain and then realize they need to like gas token as well, and so you need to go and like back and you cannot swap USDC on that chain because you don't have gas tokens. Like just that's a standard problem of everything, right? So on the other side, like I mean, for some things, I mean, they're like a little bit of it. Like again, for this chain signature specifically, there can be a little bit of additional latency with intent. So there can be a little bit of additional latency, but again, it pays off as like way improved convenience and potentially even better like filling rate because now you kind of not again going to a single party but also like trying to find a best price, trying to find best execution. And again with near, like for some of the use cases, for example for ordinals, right, you can deposit ordinal into your remote account and now you will have an NFT on near which you can trade with 1 second time, right? Which, you know, again, with ordinals, it sometimes takes like 6 hours to transfer it. So I mean, with Ethereum, it will take 12 seconds, you know, on a good day and $50. So like you can have an interesting ways where without much kind of security reduction, you're able to speed up things, but also you can like withdraw it very easily as well. So it really depends on use case and kind of application.
Yeah, I guess the current standard hasn't really been set too high. You know, we're not trying to smash transaction seconds off the board. And also, man, I wish, you know, if I had $1 for every time I had to message a friend of mine and say, hey, can you send me some gas tokens to this address? I just sent money across and I can't get it out. So yeah, I definitely resonate with that. While we've been chatting, it seems that we're kind of been alluding to like DeFi as the general use case here, like financial actions as the general use case. But I mean, there's all kinds of other use cases happening in Web3 right now. There's Web3 gaming, SocialFi, so many things popping up. I want to speak a little bit before we wrap up at the end of the hour. What's near, like kind of what are the use cases that you're building for? What can we expect on near? Is it primarily DeFi or does chain abstraction also help other industries, other categories, sorry?
Yeah, it's pretty generic. So, I mean, we see people using it across obviously DeFi and finance. I mean, payments, you know, somebody was telling me they have an off ramp, you know, into credit cards and Apple Pay. And, you know, right now they need to manually integrate every chain and, you know, figure out how to on every chain to do like smart contract account, deposit, etc. Or they can use near, right, and do it kind of across all accounts, across all chains, across all tokens. Then we have, you know, things like Sweatcoin, which is the new types of assets. And now you can, you know, go and interact with any application across all chains, right? You know, you want to buy Unstoppable Domain, boom. It doesn't matter that it's on BNB. You want to, you know, get a Mad Lad NFT, boom. It doesn't matter if it's on Solana, right? Like as a user, you don't really care about that. So really opening up their like, over 10 million, like they have 150 million installs, over I think 20 million users having accounts, to this like multi-chain world. We see things like, kind of gaming NFT, where people have issued an asset on Polygon, for example, but then building a game on another chain, right? Like, okay, well, how do you link those things? How do you make it really easy to interact? So there's a lot of various use cases, and I think like the multi-chain like fragmentation, right, that we talked a little bit before, is just kind of naturally pushes people to like, okay, well, we need to figure out how to solve it, right? If you talk with companies as well, like nobody now wants to bet on the one specific chain, because like tomorrow, base is popping, day after tomorrow, everybody's gonna flock to whatever new hot layer 2. And so like users want and developers want to have this flexibility, and kind of linking things together, right? Like, hey, what if Farcaster moves, day after tomorrow to another 203, for example. Now everybody needs to like re-register accounts, move all of their money, etc. Like that's not feasible.
Nice. I have a question that you led into beautifully there. I think that a lot of the sort of like network effect we've seen in crypto historically has been due to sort of like this synchronous composability we're seeing in all of these L1s. Due to fragmentation, that's broken, right? Like we have all of these chains, all these L1s, and the UX is worse than even like, I don't know, some asynchronous cross-contract calls or asynchronous transactions. It's just, you need to bridge through some third party. And then I think a lot of the sort of like concerns there are being negated by chain abstraction. And then could you argue that intents, like cross-chain intents, remove the need for synchronous composability?
Yeah, this is the argument Near had from day one, right? So Near is probably the only like asynchronous first blockchain where every single cross-contract call is asynchronous. And that's because our kind of hypothesis from the start was if you want to scale, you will need to deal with asynchrony. And so may as well just like put it heads on and, make it the best asynchrony possible. Now it comes with obviously limitations, right? You cannot have, like a crazy flash loan that goes through 50 different smart contracts. But maybe that's a good thing. So in turn, though, that's why kind of Near is a very good place for a lot of these things, is because we've designed asynchronous token standards. We designed kind of a lot of asynchronicity, thinking across the board. And there's other teams like Agoric and that's been thinking about this as well. So I would say that yes, for the most part, we will transition up to a lot more asynchronous composability. If you have enough security kind of unification aggregation happening, you are able to achieve really interesting results. And yes, you're missing maybe some kind of primitives, like again, flash loans being an example. Probably you're not going to be able to like flash loan for Bitcoin, swap it to Ethereum and do something and swap it back. But you can, the user level things are pretty easy to do. And the arbitrage and the things that like happening right now because of the synchronous composability is really the professional level kind of transactions that we'll see people doing on a low level kind of. I would say like important probably concept is we expect there will be sophisticated parties like who running solvers, who running market makers, who running kind of arbitrage, who are actually executing all this, and they have lower level understanding of each individual chain, how to optimize for it, how to submit transaction effectively, how to find peers in the network to effectively, put transaction in front of the next block producer. You don't expect normal users to do all that, right? Which is kind of the current expectation. Like you actually need like to connect to a right RPC that will relay a transaction in the right way. Otherwise, you're getting sandwiched by whatever's the next, MEV boost is happening. And so here we expect, as a user, just prescribe your end result, and that there's sophisticated actors who actually leveraging whatever the specific details of the blockchains are. But yeah, as a user, you get kind of asynchronous compatibility across the whole Web3.
Yeah, but it feels almost synchronous, right? Because you say like, hey, I want to do these things on all these different chains, and it will just get done or not at all, right?
Yeah. You because you described in the result, in many cases, you can achieve kind of the atomicity, right? That it gets executed or not. Although again, it's application specific, because I'm assuming some applications will offer like partial executions because you actually want that.
Yeah.
And so
that makes total sense.
We'll
so you
see
get all the benefit of both, essentially, right? Like best of
you
both
get
worlds. You can
like
do partial
developers
executions.
Developers can pretty much leverage any of these options.
Is this the, just as we come to sort of the last few minutes, is this the end of crypto maximalism as we know it?
The
meme
last
culture.
chapter.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an exciting part of everyone's day in crypto is to get on crypto Twitter and get behind your favorite colors, get on your favorite meme.
I think we still will have that. I think it's not going anywhere. We'll have, like, I can imagine, you can right now with chain signatures build, I call it an omni token, like a token that's available in every chain at once. And even if we like spin up a new roll up right now, it will be available there already. And you can imagine that becoming, meme tokens that like are everywhere, and it doesn't matter which chain you're on. But then at the same time, you can imagine like people are kind of similarly how the people vote for their teams, in sports. Like, there is not that dramatic difference. Like there's no 10x difference in professional teams in sports. But people vote for whatever team they're closest with. So I think that we'll continue seeing some of that. But I do think like a fundamental maximalism will go away, right? Like where people arguing that like my chain is better because I'll have all the users in 5 years. Like that type of thing should go away.
I fully agree. It will be like people will have maximalism for certain applications, maybe. I think some of the sort of like maximalism will seep through up, will bubble up into the application layer now. But nobody's arguing about what their favorite intranet is or internet provider, right?
You're
like
saying you're not into 192, 168, 0.2, 0.7?
Yeah, or even better, like there probably will still be maximalism amongst devs, just as there is maximalism amongst devs around sort of like AWS versus Google Cloud versus sort of like the cloud providers, right? Like there's some people that are very passionate about one over the other. So I think some devs will have like very strong preferences, but users in the end will only care about the application. And I think we're very, very close to that reality, and it's exciting.
I agree.
Which is super good because it's very easy to get a much more growth when you have your users going into bat for your application by showing the actual end user experience to other users. So that's it's a win that they have in Web 2. We could go on all day about chain abstraction, and I'm very, very excited to see where it goes, what it looks like for Near, what it looks like for everyone in the Cake framework. If you've been listening along to these episodes, I did just drop the POAP link. So go and meet yourself a POAP and you go into the raffle to win some SEDA tokens. This was the last episode of our series. Illia, it was absolutely fantastic to have you. Any last words for Near?
Yeah, I mean, I'm encouraging everyone to check out the docs for chain signatures. I think like if you are, launching an application, thinking of application, this is the tool for you. And then you can also use any other blockchain and any other kind of block space around the world to really leverage that. And otherwise, I encourage everyone to try out applications like DapDap, Sweatcoin, and others who are actually bringing this chain abstraction to life for the end user. And DapDap has points, so
that'll do it. That'll get the people over there. You watch them flock down. Fantastic, Illia. Amazing. Jasper, any last words? Something big happening at the end of this week, perhaps, from the SEDA crew?
Yeah, we're announcing the first version of our chain like the launch date end of this week. So keep your eyes open for that. Should be announced sometime tomorrow.
Could possibly potentially be announced sometime tomorrow. Look forward to it. Jasper, thanks for your time as always. Thank you, Illia, for your time as well. And thanks everyone for joining in. It's been a fantastic series. Look forward to speaking to you again in the future sometime. Illia. All right.
Thanks for inviting us.
All right now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.